Thank you very much. Good morning. As a global sales leader for an open source company, I'm able to give talks like this around the world. And what I'll tell you is this event that's put on by Linux Polska and their sponsors, every year there's, as Werner had mentioned, more and more people. It's very exciting and gives me a lot of enthusiasm to see how much adoption and interest in open source there is in Poland. So thank you very much for having me. I've spent over 10 years in the open source software arena for a while with Red Hat, watching the shift from Unix to Linux and watching the shift from proprietary middleware to open source alternatives. And now with EnterpriseDB, I'm able to see that same evolution, that same movement from proprietary database technologies to open source. So Werner gave a good overview of the past, present, and future of open source, and now I'll specifically talk about what that means from a database perspective. So everybody here probably knows that in your IT budget, database is the most expensive line item of all of your infrastructure software. Costs are crazy, vendor lock-in is crazy, the amount of turmoil of being locked into such high prices when we've seen probably the worst financial crisis probably in our lifetime over the last couple years. The need to do things differently is upon us, and so we're seeing that move with open source and database. But it's more than just cost savings that customers are looking for. So it's great to save money, it's great to not have license costs, but you also need to save money on your soft costs, right? So just the fact that something's open source doesn't make it better, right? You need to have the ability to set things up easily, the ability to scale easily, the ability to have human resources that know how to work on those projects. And then, of course, you still need to have flexibility. You need to be able to integrate that software with the other components in your data center. Avoid lock-in. And then, of course, you need to see a roadmap. You need to make sure that that open source technology actually has a future, and that future is in line with the direction that your company is taking around its technology innovation. And finally, you need someone that can help you not only deploy that software, but manage, maintain, and get into production that software as well. So that's where optimizing with open source around database, that's where we can start. So as I mentioned, we saw the move from Unix to Linux. We saw the move from proprietary middleware technologies, WebSphere and WebLogic, to open source alternatives. And now we're seeing the same move with database. So there's the three legs of the infrastructure software stool. And now with database, that's really, because it's the most expensive line item in your IT budget, where we're seeing the most cost savings as well. Some facts about Postgres that you might not be aware of. It's the fourth most deployed database in the world, and according to DB Engines, it was the second fastest database growth for 2013. So if you can keep that in context, imagine the other two in the top three were NoSQL upstarts, MongoDB, and Cassandra. So imagine Postgres is actually older than the Linux community. It's been around since the late 70s, and is still the second fastest growing database last year. The reason for that is it's really developed from the same technology where Oracle and IBM came from, the System R white paper that was written back in the late 70s, to give you the ability to have ACID compliance, to have data integrity, to have multi-version concurrency control, to have all of those things. But the great thing about Postgres is it's not the same as it was 30 years ago. It's evolved. So for those of us that have been in this industry for a while, you know, in the last 25 or 30 years, every few years a new technology comes along that's going to unseat the relational database market. Relational database is old, people tell you. It's not built for the workloads we're using today. So in the 90s, we saw that with object relational database technology. And then at the turn of the century, we saw that with XML storage capabilities. And now we're seeing that same kind of argument or theory that relational database is going away with NoSQL capabilities. The truth is, what happens with relational database projects or companies is that these projects look at what technology customers are wanting. They look at the technology that is being created, vet that technology, and then build it into the distribution. So you may not be aware that Postgres actually has had a key value store since 2006, which is actually since before most of the NoSQL projects were even in existence. What's more, with JSON functionality, you have a document storage engine that's very similar to what you would get from Mongo that's been in PostgreSQL since version 9.2. Improvements came again in 9.3, and now in 9.4, which comes out in September, PostgreSQL will have binary support for JSON as well. So even faster performance for using Postgres in a NoSQL environment. And what's great about that is you're not giving up the durability and the integrity of the database and your data sources. Along with that, you'll see foreign data wrappers in Postgres as well. So imagine if you still want to use other data sources besides Postgres for your workloads, what foreign data wrappers do is actually allow Postgres to see that data source, whether it's Mongo or Oracle or SQL Server, simply as a table that you can query and write to, which means that you have the ability to have Postgres be really the connection point for all of your data. And the evolution of Postgres comes from what the market is looking for. So on one hand, you've got users that want easy to deploy, easy to set up, read mostly or read only web applications. So you see that on the left-hand side, where you can use MySQL or data sources like that. On the right side, you see more high-end requirements, mission-critical applications that need high scalability and reliability and security. And now we're seeing a pull from the top with the big data phenomenon. 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. So as we see, with an application that takes 3 weeks to get to 50 million users, there's a lot more data being created by workloads. And so Postgres is also evolving to fit those needs. So on the left side, constantly making things easier to use, easier to deploy, easier to fix bugs, faster performance for your read-only, read-mostly workloads. On the right side, you're constantly seeing improvements around scalability, both vertical scalability and horizontal scalability. And then, of course, always looking at high availability performance improvements as well. So whether it's replication, backup, failover, there's always new capability being included into the project. And with the new workloads around big data, you're seeing the addition of things like the foreign data wrappers, JSON functionality, and the key value pair. What it really means is Postgres is now able to handle more of the total workloads in your data center than ever before. In fact, I'd argue more workloads than any other single database can handle in your environment. Our job at EnterpriseDB with our partners at Linux Polska is to bridge the gap between what the community is doing and what the users are looking for. We do that to enable the commercial adoption of Postgres and provide you with the services, support, maintenance, low cost that you're looking for. So over the next 2 days, you'll hear presentations from Linux Polska and from EnterpriseDB about how to use the database, how to use it today in different environments, how to set it up, how to use replication, etc. And so feel free to come to our booth, ask us any questions, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.